By the end of the 18th century, the Protestant Episcopal Church had become one church among several others in the states. In 1817, the General Convention of the Church established the General Theological Seminary in New York, the oldest seminary in the Anglican Communion, founded by the Right Reverend John Henry Hobart, who traveled constantly to build up the church and to propagate the importance of the episcopacy and apostolic succession. In 1823, the vestry at St. Paul's, Church Alexandria, founded the Virginia Theological Seminary, a seminary committed to the evangelical heritage of the Episcopal Church. In 1835, General Convention appointed Jackson Kemper as a missionary bishop out west to Indiana and Missouri and Wisconsin and Iowa. Kemper championed a more extensive outreach to the Native Americans, endorsing translations of the scriptures and worship services into Indian languages. Kemper also founded Nashotah House, a seminary in Wisconsin where students followed a monastic way of life, waking up at 5 a.m. for prayers, receiving communion weekly, supporting themselves by physical labor, and evangelizing the countryside. General Convention also sent the Right Reverend George Freeman as a missionary bishop to Arkansas, Texas, and Indian Territory. In 1844, Freeman, who was formerly the rector of Christ Church in Raleigh, North Carolina, rose to fame in the Episcopal Church for preaching a series of sermons and publishing pamphlets that supported slavery, insisting that slavery was, quote, agreeable to the order of divine providence, and that, quote, no man without a new revelation from heaven was entitled to pronounce it wrong. Before the Civil War, nearly all of the Southern bishops owned slaves, and a group of these bishops got together to establish the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee in 1857. The founders' and trustees' plan was to make the University of the South a recognized center for the study of race, and thereby a sturdy ideological pillar of a civilization based on enslavement of people of African descent. As the wealthiest and most privileged church in America and the direct descendant of the Church of England, the Episcopal Church was an active supporter of slavery. In the decades leading up to the Civil War, the Presbyterian, Methodist, and Baptist churches publicly struggled and waged internal battle over the institution of slavery. And during that same period, Pope Gregory XVI declared it unconscionable to enslave, persecute, or otherwise exploit, quote, Indians, Negroes, or other classes of men. In England, Anglicans like William Wilberforce were at the forefront of the abolitionist movement. So although there was a growing global Christian consensus against slavery in all the churches in America and England, the Episcopal Church in the North and South was arguably the most willing to continue accommodating slaveholders and slave traders and upper-class racists, and the least likely to welcome the equal and full participation of black people, slave or free. Bishop Samuel Wilberforce in England, son of William Wilberforce, looked with shame at his American cousins when he wrote, "The Episcopal Church raises no voice against the predominant evil of slavery. She palliates it in theory, and in practice she shares in it." The Episcopal Church in the North was arguably as invested in slavery as its southern counterpart. James DeWolf, a senator of Rhode Island, was an Episcopalian and the most prosperous slave trader in U.S. history. Although Philadelphia boasts the denomination's first black church, St. Thomas Episcopal Church, founded by its first black priest, Father Absalom Jones, the diocese denied the parish a seat in its diocesan convention because, according to opposition leaders, quote, the color and physical and social condition and education of the blacks render them unfit to participate in legislative bodies, unquote. During the Civil War, Bishop John Henry Hopkins of Vermont served as the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church by virtue of seniority, and he wrote a text titled The Bible View of Slavery, in which he endorsed slavery, saying, quote, slavery as maintained in the southern states appears to me fully authorized in the Old and New Testament. That very slavery, in my humble judgment, has raised the Negro incomparably higher in the scale of humanity, and seems in fact to be the only instrumentality through which the heathen posterity of Canaan had been raised at all. During the Civil War, when Southern bishops pulled away to form their own Confederate church, presiding Bishop John Henry Hopkins continued to have their names called at every vote in the House of Bishops. After the end of the war, Hopkins helped to reunite the Southern and Northern bishops, and the friction in the House was less over slavery and more over the rupture of their unity. The majority of Episcopal bishops and the Church's top clergy and lay leaders consistently supported slavery and the presumption of white superiority. There were, however, some voices of dissent within the Episcopal Church when it came to slavery before the Civil War. Some Episcopalians formed, along with Presbyterians and other interested Christians, the American Colonization Society in 1860, which followed the British example in Sierra Leone of sending freed slaves to Liberia. Francis Scott Key, Episcopal author of the American National Anthem, President James Madison, a longtime president of the Society, and later Bishop of Virginia William Meade, were among early supporters of the Society. Also in 1856, students of Virginia Theological Seminary, including Phillips Brooks, who would later become the famous preacher and rector of Trinity Church in Copley Square, Boston, threatened to withdraw if the school did not guarantee protection for students who spoke out against slavery, since there were rumors that residents of the neighborhood had threatened a student preacher with tar and feathers. The faculty agreed to offer protection and scheduled on-campus discussion about the morality or immorality of slavery. After a long and bloody national war, the Episcopal Church reconciled North and South. During Reconstruction, the Church continued its general passivity and silence about the sin of slavery. Rather than addressing the aftermath of the war and the need for restoration at home, the Church turned to a season of missionary zeal, sending missionaries to South America and Asia and Africa. In 1821, the Church founded the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society, and in 1835, the General Convention adopted a new constitution which made membership in that missionary society no longer voluntary, but inclusive of all the baptized in the Episcopal Church. So if one was baptized in the Episcopal Church, they were a member of the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society. The Constitution further declared the entire world, to be the missionary field of the Church, and entrusted general missionary work to a reorganized Board of Missions. In 1877, the Constitution of the Society was enacted as a canon of the General Convention. One Episcopal missionary was Samuel Isaac Joseph Shereshevsky, who was born of Jewish parents in Lithuania and then became a bishop in China and a translator of the Bible into Chinese. Another was James Theodore Hawley, born of African-American parents in Baltimore and brought up as Roman Catholic, and who later became a bishop and established in Haiti a church that is equal in size today to the largest American dioceses and plays a central role in the life of that country. Regarding domestic mission work, Episcopal priest William Augustus Muhlenberg set in motion the development of the New England Episcopal Preparatory School, founded the Church of the Holy Communion in New York, which offered communion each week and was the first to offer free pews, which was not the norm at the time. And he also founded St. Luke's Hospital and a woman's order that eventually led to the establishment of the Community of St. Mary, the oldest woman's monastic order in the Episcopal Church. But more than all this, it was Muhlenberg who made the proposal that the Episcopal Church, which claimed apostolic succession, ordained bishops to serve in other churches. This proposal led to the so-called Chicago-Lambeth Quadrilateral, a statement written by William Reed Huntington that proposed that the separated Christian churches in the world should be united around the following four principles: the Bible, Old and New Testaments, the two sacraments of Holy Baptism and Holy Communion, the creeds, the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, and the historic episcopate. This statement was adopted by the bishops of the Episcopal Church in Chicago in 1886, and then later in 1888 by the bishops of the Anglican Communion at Lambeth. The Chicago-Lambeth Quadrilateral has proven to have significant impact on ecumenical dialogue as well as on Anglican identity, as it provides a basis for a shared ethos across the global Anglican Communion.